This is a CFexpress card from Pergear, and it costs a third of the CFexpress cards from Sony. And since I have 4 of these Sony cards, for both of my cameras, I spent almost €1,400, which is almost the same in dollars, for these cards. If I had bought these Pergear cards instead, I would have saved almost €1,000. But why would anybody even need an expensive CFexpress card instead of a normal, much cheaper SD card? Because in some recording modes, your camera wants to write so much data in so little time on your SD card that it cannot handle it anymore. Such a mode would be recording in 4K, 120 frames per second, all intro mode. A CFexpress card solves this problem because it's much faster than an SD card. Sony cameras like the FX6, A7S III, A1, FX3, they use these smaller CFexpress Type A cards. There are even bigger ones, Type B and C, and they are even quicker. And here's an explanation of the speed problem we have with normal SD cards. A normal SD card with the text V90 on it offers a sustained write speed of at least 90 megabytes per second. That's the speed you need when your camera continuously writes data on the card. The maximum read speed is claimed to be about 300 megabytes per second, but that's the speed you need when you copy data from the card to your computer. It's not about writing on the card. This Type A card from Pergear has a write speed of at least 400 megabytes per second and goes up to even 900 megabytes per second. And the maximum read speed is 880 megabytes per second. So your camera can write at least 4 times more data in it per second than on a normal SD card. And that's needed when you write in 4K 120 frames per second, all intra, because you need at least 150 megabytes per second here. And not all V90 SD cards can handle this safely. It might work, but I once had the case where I recorded it and afterwards I had a corrupt file on the card. It had dropped frames and was pretty much unusable. You even get a notification on the FX6 that tells you that it's not happy with a normal SD card when you want to use it for these high bitrate shooting modes. And that's why I equipped all of my cameras with CFexpress Type A cards, and if I had known that Pergear produces high quality cards as well, I would have saved a lot. But how much exactly? The 260GB card from Pergear is €170. That's 60 cents per gigabyte. There is no exact Sony card with that size, but the smaller one with 160GB is already €340. That's €2.12 per gigabyte. And there is a larger one from Sony with 320GB, which costs €570. So we can see that the Pergear card is at least 3 times cheaper than an equivalent Sony card. And for you it is even cheaper because you get a 10% discount code in the video description below. But as always, when things are cheap, we need to test if they are just as good as the expensive ones. I'm filming in 4K 120 all intra, so in the highest bitrate, and of course both cards are doing well because they have more write speeds than the needed 150 megabytes per second. So we don't even get close to what this card is capable of writing. But how could we test these higher write speeds? Well, let's take a card reader, plug it in, and now we don't read from the card, we write to the card from the computer. By the way, I got this nice card reader from Pergear as well, which has a CFexpress slot and a normal SD slot. Perfect for traveling. Let's start with the Pergear and copy this 44GB file onto the card and see how long it takes. It's done in 94 seconds, that's 471 megabytes per second, so even quicker than Pergear writes on their cards. Now let's test the Sony. And it did it in 69 seconds. That's 641 megabytes per second. Not exactly as much as they write on the card, but really quick. The thing is, this is a great speed, but there is no real use case for it if you only have a Sony camera that only records in 4K 120. So the Pergear card is just as good for recording in the highest bitrate in 4K with any of my cameras. Now let's test the speed when we transfer files from the CFexpress card to the computer. And here we really see an advantage compared to a normal SD card. As you can see, I have 2 drives on my computer. Both are card readers with a CFexpress card in it. On the top, this is the Pergear card, on the bottom, the Sony card. Both contain the same files with about 133 gigabytes. Let's start copying them from the Pergear card to the computer. And it takes 3 minutes 43 seconds. Okay, now we copy it from the Sony card and it takes... what? 8 minutes 42 seconds? Nope, this can't be true. Sony will kill me if I put this online. Let's give the card another chance. Let's use the same card reader as with Pergear, even the same USB port on the computer. And now... thank God, 3 minutes 55 seconds. So 12 seconds slower than the Pergear card. Pergear states to have a maximum read speed of 880 megabytes per second. In my case it were about 600. And Sony claims to have a maximum read speed of 800 megabytes per second. In my tests it were 566. In comparison, when you copy the data from an SD card and not from a CFexpress, on my computer with my card reader it took 22 minutes. So I'm really happy that I'm using CFexpress now. The last test was reliability. If it's cheap but not reliable, I'd never buy it. Luckily, I can say I have this card for a few weeks now and I've tested it intensively. In my studio here, I recorded with this card and filled it up until it was full for 30 times. No issue with any file. Then, of course, I made some real-life tests during long shoots. I filmed a theatrical performance, an entire concert, and I used it for client work as well. No issues whatsoever. So the final result must be that this card here is absolutely worth it and I can totally recommend it. And again, if you want to buy it, there are links in the description where you can save another 10%. And if you want to know where you can save a lot of money as well, you should check out this video here. A CFexpress card.